Welcome to Living Excellently. Become your masterpiece, aligned in heart, mind, and spirit, with host Gina T. Joining Dr. Pat each month on TransformationTalkRadio.com. Are you curious about how to live a more excellent life? Do you understand the extraordinary masterpiece you were intended to be? With willingness, you can make change that creates ripples in the world. Together, we can change the world with an essence of love, joy, compassion, and grace. Tune in as Gina T guides you to spiritual alignment, continuing your life journey with awe and wonder. Level up to live excellently, give generously, and trust unconditionally.
Wow, everybody, welcome. Benny, you did such a great job on that opener, Benny.
Well, thank you, Pat.
Wow. That's one of your finest, I think. That was so good.
20 years, finally finished. All right. I'm hanging it up, Pat. I'll see you later.
Well, it's really good. I love the whole thing, like the music and like when you paused and like Gina T.
Perfect for
I
her.
loved how you did that. What a super, that was like, what do you say? Knocked it out of the park. Benny did on that one. All of our producers get to participate in the making of a show, and let me thank them all. Jacob is at the helm today. Hi, Jacob. Olivia is making sure that we look great on Facebook. Hi, Olivia. And Benny, of course, is pushing a million buttons to pull it all together so it all goes to the right place. But none of this happens without all of you, the best audience on the planet. You have been so and been with us for 18 years. And I'm telling you, we're making good on our promises. One of the things that has happened, and I want to introduce Gina T to you. One of the things that has happened is we have had more requests for 3 different channels. And people know we're getting ready to launch things. We've had more requests. And about a year ago, we were asked to hurry up and put up the God Talk channel. And we couldn't do that in a way that was going to meet my standards. Better yet, it was not going to meet God's standards for what. And I say this in a very open perspective about it. Because today you're going to meet Gina T, living excellently with Gina T. Become your masterpiece aligned in heart, mind, and spirit. Today, we're talking about Bible scriptures which expose your value to help you become your most excellent self. Now, here's a little bit about the show. You know, does the idea, this is a great question from Gina, does the idea of reading Bible seem too religious or outdated, as if there's nothing relevant in it for you? Whatever your perception is, you might be surprised to discover that it's a guide to realize your highest potential and become the masterpiece you were designed to be, made in the image of love. Now, Gina, you should know about Gina T. You're going to hear a lot about Gina. This is a great show, but Gina is more than that. She is a spiritual alignment coach. She has been doing that, you know, since 06. Something was going on in 06 and 07. I'm just saying. But more than that, she's the owner of An Excellent Life. She's hosted retreats, workshops. It's like I said in the last show, if you all were listening, my favorite quote, and it also appeared in the hit series, The Walking Dead. My favorite quote was, "Faith without works is dead." Now, for a long time, I misquoted that because my stepmom had like a little accent. So I thought she was saying faith without works is death. Same idea, but a little bit different spin. But here we are. When you take a look at Gina T and the exploration of her Christian background, but at a new level, what do you think she encountered? You're going to hear that today. What do you think she uncovered? What do you think the message is in the world today? First generation Italian American coming to the plate, California native, but now is talking about something that all of us can wrap our minds around. Maybe that comes from really having to do something she didn't think about. Maybe becoming a single mom, maybe raising 7 children on her own, maybe as co-founder of Lotus. I can go maybe, 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 maybe. But the point is this: we're not going to have a conversation about how she's not living up to Faith Without Works is dead. Gina T, great to have you.
Thank you for having me on your show, Dr. Pat. I'm really excited to be here.
Man, I got to start with your journey if I could. I want to come out of the gate. And I want to come out of the gate because everyone that says yes to a life's course like this, a pathway, a purpose, some people say, right?
Hmm.
There is always a deep story behind it. I would like to know from you, what challenges, what obstacles, what happened? Who tapped you on the shoulder? Who hit you by a 2x4? What happened to bring you to this very moment to be an advocate for the message of love?
Oh, gosh. It's been a long road.
That's
sure.
why we do an hour show.
Yeah. Well, as you said, as a first generation Italian Catholic family, we had our rules and we needed to follow them. And my dad was in the Marines for 21 years. And so we saluted, yes, sir, daddy. So I had a really rough start. But when you're little, you don't know that. You don't recognize things that are abusive as abuse. You don't recognize a lot of things that, and not just from one perspective, but I had friends in school girlfriends who were manipulating, and I didn't know all that, because we're innocent children. And somewhere along the way, when I left my first husband because he was abusive, I wanted to get an annulment from the Catholic Church. And that was the biggest challenge. And I said, I don't think that's in the Bible. So I started going to different Christian churches. Yeah.
I just shared this story about my stepmom. So yeah, keep going.
You do know. Yes, I know your story. And it's pretty similar in a lot of ways. It seems that when humans get involved and our ego takes over, and I've heard this, ego stands for edge God out.
Yeah.
When we start doing that, and it can be anywhere, anytime, in a church, in a store, in your job, when we start to edge God out of our lives, it disconnects us from that alignment. It's like pulling the plug out of the wall, and now you can't use that appliance anymore. There's no more electricity going to it. And that's why it's so important. And that's when I decided, well, it wasn't then, it was a little bit later, because I was working many hours and raising my kids on my own. I found that if I didn't get back into this alignment in my spirit, and who am I aligning with? I don't know, but I have to find out. If I don't do that, my life is going to turn out in a very dark way.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah.
And I mean, don't you really find it interesting? I want to just ask you this, because I really been thinking about this a lot. Don't you really find it interesting how we find strength out of adversity?
Exactly. Yeah. It is really interesting. And we have to continue to be resourceful and resilient so that we can keep seeing the answers to our questions. And I think that's the journey that a lot of us have stayed on. And it's taken us to an amazing level, and we keep leveling up, which is amazing. Yeah.
And one of the things that brings us here is really the translation of those life experiences, or rather, let me say transmutation of our life experiences, to bring us to this point that we are uniquely made in the image of love, compassion, and grace. And that's a powerful part of your message. So help us remind ourselves of to know who we are?
So as we're going along in life, you innately know that there's something you want to belong to, something you want to connect to. We don't have it right in front of us because for generations, or it's been covered up, circumstances and experiences, and not just ours but other people's. So we are born into those, and it's each one of our personal responsibility, especially as we become an adult. We need to take personal responsibility for moving into the space of knowing where we come from, who we are, how we were created as a masterpiece from the very beginning. So once we do, and we start using our thoughts, words, and actions in a different way,
Yeah.
it multiplies your ability to live a better life.
Mm. What
And
are some of the things that we discover along the way about our nature, right? Especially when we read part of the scriptures that says God created humans in his own image, right? It's a powerful phrase, and yet it seems like we struggle to live up with that, right?
yes, and I think a lot of the reason is because we don't really understand what that means.
Yeah, that's right.
Because it also says, he made them human, male and female, in his image. What in the world does that even mean?
Yeah.
I don't know. So yeah, and translation, could account for a lot of the confusion. But what it came down to for me, and I'm not bragging, but I've read the Bible 11 times, and each time I read a little bit, I ask for wisdom, and I journal and write down every thought that comes into my mind, because it's God inspired. It's not me, which is awesome. It takes responsibility off of me, but definitely God inspired. And we have that skewed vision of ourselves because of generations and experiences and circumstances and expectations that are unrealistic. So when God tells us that we are created in his image, he's telling us that we were created in the image of his Holy Spirit, the divine spirit who's here with us right now, who is a direct connection to infinity. And the whole idea of that is the spirit is all-encompassing love, compassion, and grace. And that's where we find joy.
Yeah. Part of this too, and I think the reason things are coming up for, let me just call it reevaluation, that's my term, is because of the times we're living in now. The level of the divisive nature of what we're living in right now. And this is a conversation that has to include our capacity to imagine and create. Because if we're not imagining a world that is filled with love and compassion and grace, then we're literally not holding that in the unspoken consciousness that we bring forward, are we?
Correct. Yeah. And I use the word recalibration.
I love that. That's a good word. Yeah, no, right.
Yeah, recalibrating with who I originally was intended to be. So the supreme being that lives in you and through you is breathed into you and spoken into being from the essence of imagination and creativity, like you said, and love, compassion, and grace. This emits the capacity that we have to imagine and create, because if you look around you at this world, it took a lot of imagination and creativity to make all the different types of frogs and everything, trees, whatever is out there.
Yeah, right now I'm fascinated with spiders. I'm just having a good time. Yeah, I want to take a short break. When we come back, more with my very special, right on the show today, Living Excellently with Gina T. Become your masterpiece aligned in heart, mind, and spirit. When we come back, we're going to talk about how to do this. You know, are you in the belief that you are a masterpiece? What does that look like? And if that is true, then what is the revealing process so that you can look in the mirror and see it? When we come back, we're going to talk about the bridge between the capacity to imagine and then create enormous, enormous bandwidth for love, compassion, and grace. And if we do that, where do we go from there? Do you believe you were born as a masterpiece? Stay tuned. We're going to take that on. Gina T is going to take that on. We'll be right back. Hey, everybody, welcome back. So great to have all of you tune us in and turn us on. For those of you out there, Living Excellently with Gina T, we're going to talk more about what this means, but how do we get exposed to our value? How do we get exposed to our values so we can become our most excellent selves? How do we do that? You know, there was something my mom used to say, and I never knew where she got it from, but one of the sayings was, know what's in front of your face, and what is hidden from you will be disclosed to you. For there is nothing hidden that will not be revealed. And what I loved about that is that every day for me is a revelation. Every day for me is a discovery. And I wonder how you all are making out discovering you're a masterpiece. I wonder where you are, but I'm not going to talk about that. Gina T is. Gina, before we roll, let's take a minute and let folks know how they can find out more about you. Tell us about what you've got going on, free meditations, books, all of the above.
All of the above. I have a free meditation on my website. It should be on by this afternoon. And it's to help you become that person in alignment and know that you are anointed. Holy means anointed. So the Holy Spirit is the anointing spirit that comes and anoints us, but we need to purposefully get into that alignment to have it. So my website is ginat.com. Very simple. I'm on Instagram, Gina T Coach. And I'm on Facebook as well, but I do more on Instagram, I believe.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah. So that's where I'm at.
Well, I love it, because let's talk about this idea. This is what we kicked off at the beginning of the show. And let's talk about this from your perspective. How do scriptures expose us to our value, our personal value? You know, and then how does that then guide the way for us to become our most excellent self? And before the break, I asked the question, how many people believe they were born a masterpiece? Take us on the journey to understand that statement.
Okay, well, there was a long time ago that I didn't believe that. And people would say, you need to love yourself more. And I had no idea what that meant. No one would explain it to me. I was back in the 80s. You know, it was just one of those things that people would say. And I would say, how? And they couldn't tell me. So I went on a quest. You probably know about World of Warcraft. It's all about going on quests. And that was an inspiration for me. I didn't play it, but later on my sons did. And I was like, yeah, the quest. We all have a quest.
Right.
Yeah. And if I take it seriously, I'm going to find whatever's at the end of that quest, what I'm looking for. I also need to have a spirit of, or a feeling, a sense of childlike wonder and reverence and respectful awe for life, for humans, for everything around me, for every day that I get to wake up and do more. So it's an attitude that we can develop. And then I was looking at a lot of different quotes and a lot of different, not just philosophies and religions, because that's a little too much. So I found Michelangelo said Every block of stone has a statue in it.
Mhm.
And it is a task of the sculptor to discover it. I saw an angel in the marble and carved until I set him free. This is the spirit and soul alignment we all innately crave. And it's right here on the inside, so that it becomes each person's personal responsibility to carve away what no longer serves that purpose.
Yeah.
And it's a lifelong quest of being perfected.
Yeah, you know what I love about that story that you just shared, because I want to really reference it for a minute for everybody. What I love about it is how quick we are to think that we do not have the capacity or ability of a Michelangelo.
Mm.
I mean, how we are really quickly to point out, you know, I'm begging for money at the Port Authority, right? And I really think this is because of my upbringing by my stepmom. I never thought for a minute that I would remain homeless. Never entered my mind. But it's so often, though, other places in my life where I have felt defeated, where I had felt that there was so much chiseled out of stone, there wasn't very much left to create a masterpiece. And this is really what you're helping people remember, isn't it? This is what you're helping people, how to keep our eyes on the prize, so to speak. And the prize is us.
Exactly. There's a quote, and there's a verse in the Bible that talks about the pearl of great price. You are the pearl of great price. It took a lot to get to where you are. And everything's temporary. You know, all the bad stuff we go through, it's all temporary. And if we know that, we can start seeing past it.
Mhm.
And when you see the essence of who you are in your spirit made in the foundation of love, you can begin to surrender everything that isn't part of God's love.
Mm.
And you begin to love yourself for the mere fact that you were made by love. That was the answer to my question. When people would say you need to love yourself, I would say, I don't know how. I don't know what you mean.
Right.
And that's it.
Right. It is it. You know, and to really paraphrase what you just said, you know, I come from an upbringing, especially, and I keep referencing my stepmom, I must be channeling her today, where she was a firm believer that no matter what you go through in life, you're going to land in a better place.
Mm.
That was just her philosophy. You know, maybe, Pat, you got rejected by 36 schools, but the school that actually accepted you and made you wait a year, what was the gift in that? Well, here's the gift. The gift in that was I got to move to Seattle. I spent a year in Seattle not having to do anything, right? I did a little bit job searching, looking for this and looking for that, but I was on a wait list for Claremont.
Hmm.
And I had that time to be with my dog in the last year of his life, right? How special was that? To meet a group of people, you know, to strengthen my spirituality, to volunteer, right? So here's a scenario where you're thinking everything is coming down, the walls are coming down. But literally, isn't it interesting how God somehow knows that you need that time to build up your strength for what's about to come? And I find that fascinating when I look back, that I've always been given that time. Even if I thought, man, this is painful, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that time in my life was a very special time. That 1 year before I got the letter, come down to Claremont in 94, it was a very special time. I met the most interesting people and artists. I got to ride my Harley. Isn't the work that you do of importance in helping people remember what you just said, that these things are temporary? And when we come back or bounce back, we bounce back better. We're going to take a short break and we come back. Are you ready to bounce back to the image, to the sculpted piece, that you are a valuable reflection of love? Are you ready to do the bounce back to that? Are you ready to reveal that piece of art that you are? When we come back, Gina T is going to take us on a journey of how we are uniquely and wonderfully made. And what about our experiences that guide us to become better? Stay tuned, everybody. We're going to take a short break. We'll be right back with Gina. Welcome back. It's so great to have all of you tune us in and turn us on. You're listening to Living Excellently with Gina T and me, Dr. Pat. This is about becoming your masterpiece aligned in heart, mind, and spirit. Today Gina is taking us on a journey and exploring, Bible scriptures. How do they expose our value to help us become our most excellent selves? Before we jump into really looking at the blueprint that shows us about our reflection, how do people find out more about you? How can they work with you? All of the above.
Thank you. My website, ginat.com. I only have 2 services, either one-to-one coaching or a subscription, which is a monthly coaching with me, a Zoom meeting with whoever else is in the group, and other extra things. And so I love giving what I have, because this life thing is kind of difficult, and it's just gotten even more difficult with our parameters kind of shortening a little bit. So I like to share what I know and what's taken me years and tears and whatever else to get here.
Well, you said it.
Yeah. So there, and I have a book. I was having some glitches with the paperback, so it's not up. I took it down because it was not working out well, but there is an ebook, Become Your Masterpiece, and it's part of my coaching, how I begin with people that I coach.
And that'll be on the way in the future for people to just, put on their radar, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Look, this is a reminder that all of us need to have, because we've gone through some tough times. We're second guessing ourselves. There have been people giving up faith, really not sure about hope. A lot of conversation in the pop culture and the media about, we don't understand why people are not coming back to their jobs. Okay, well, I can give you a little insight why people wouldn't come back to their jobs. The same reason I didn't go back to the workforce after my loss. It was an exploration, right? But it's what you're talking about now. It's like, here you are. How do we tap into that beautiful reflection of love? I mean, like, we got to do our own mirror on the wall, who's the right? This is really the time for us to see that reflection. How do you help people? How do you work to help us understand how perfectly, uniquely, and wonderfully made we are, even when you lose your job, your spouse leaves you, your partner leaves you, maybe you're like me, you come home one day and all your stuff is in the front yard and you have no place to go. Help us remember this. And then what do?
Well, you just reminded me of Psalm 23, talks about walking through the valley of the shadow of death. And when I read that a few times some years ago, and I realized it's only a valley, it's only a shadow. It's not really death. It feels like death when you're going through it, but you need to keep going through it. You can't stop there or take a detour. You have to get to the other side. So you need to go through it. And one of the pieces of that puzzle is gratitude. Knowing that when you are grateful and you thank God for every little piece of this thing, even the things that are uncomfortable and disturbing and even make you fearful, but you can't stay there, because you are grateful for those things. Because as you were talking about your story, it got you where you needed to go, and it gave you some more texture in your life
Yeah,
by
that's a
going
great way
through
to
it.
put it.
Yeah, so that's one of the main things, and that's how I've taught my kids. And I hear things from them, and I see them emulating, the things that I've taught them, and that's the best form of what's the word? Sorry. When someone
It,
looks up to you,
yeah, it's the best model of reflection.
Yes.
Right. It's the best model. And I commented on this in the last hour,
Hmm.
and I kind of joked about it, but I really started to think about this. I must mention my stepmom, Benny. They're probably everybody's going to roll their eyes right now, but I must be mentioning my stepmom almost every day on the show. And the question is, why now? I mean, I've talked about my stepmom before, but it's almost every day I'm getting a message from her, right? And it's in the vein of what you just talked about. It's in the vein of remembering. It's in the vein of reflecting. It's in the vein of keeping your heart open, even when you really just want to lock it up and shut it down.
Mm-hmm.
Because we're living in a time now and where we need to not shut our hearts to each other, but this is a time to chip away the crust that's around our hearts, so we could see that we are human to human, people, person to person, not a skin color, not a religion. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yes, I do. Definitely. And you're right. There has to be that openness. We can't shut down. We each have that choice. In fact, I taught myself through it every once in a while. I just want to stop.
Yeah.
And hide in my room. Can I
Oh
just hide
boy.
in my room?
Oh my gosh. Do you know, I realized I hadn't gone out all weekend.
Oh no.
And this morning I was talking to Linda on the way to the office, and I was like thinking, yes, it was a big work weekend for us, but wasn't really, or did I just feel like being like a cave person for a couple days, right?
Yeah, I get that.
Yeah,
It's
you just don't want a couple days to turn into a couple months, right?
no, definitely not. No. And I try to at least get outside for 10 minutes if that's all I have.
Yeah.
Just get out of my four walls
Yeah.
and get a new perspective, because we do get trapped easily. Our minds play tricks on us. And then we start, getting into different types of fear. And that is an absence of love where
Wow.
I don't want to be. And I'm sure most people don't, they just don't know how. Yeah. So yeah, you're right. It's easy to get trapped in our own space, whether it's our head space or physical
Yeah.
space or whatever, or in a relationship that's detrimental to us. But all it takes is standing up and saying, no, this is what I don't want. Now I need to go search for what I do want.
Can you talk about what you just said? I want to get back to it, about fear being an absence of love. It's a great way to look at it, isn't it?
It is. It's not easy to explain in just a couple of minutes. However, I will try to.
Yeah, go for it.
When I know who I am and where I came from, and not in an arrogant way, it's actually humbling when you know this enormous piece of of divinity has looked at us and said, I love you and I want to make you in this way, with this core foundation that has everything good in it.
Mm.
And it's something that we need to find and get back to. Once we do, once you feel it in your gut, you just know that you can express this love to yourself and to others in such a way of honor and respect, that all the other issues disappear. So anything that doesn't feel like that is a lack of love. And it brings fear into our hearts because it opens up the door that says, oh my gosh, what about this? And what if this? And, those things, those are all from fear. And you can choose to keep it or get rid of it. No, I don't want that. So I'm going to look for this instead.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, how many times, from your reference, how many times has there been a reference in the Bible to have no fear? Maybe not in those words. Maybe don't be afraid. Maybe like that. You understand what I mean?
I
There's
do.
so many. There are many.
There's so many. I know. I wish I had that number right here because, yeah, there are so many.
But the point
Be
is,
strong and courageous.
exactly.
Yes.
And, I thought about this a lot because, I work with young women in a recovery program.
Mm.
And I don't know how many people know this, but those recovery programs are spiritual programs. That's out of the gate. That's absolutely foundational to those programs. And when we were looking at something like that, and this, by the way, there are other things in those programs. I mean, they're really, really tough things in there. But what I often think about is that the emphasis is you must put God's spirit first, right?
Mm.
That is like an emphasis. And yet it is one of the most difficult things, one, to explain, and two, to put in practice.
Yes, that's true. It just takes making one choice at a time.
But it's cornerstone. It's really a cornerstone. I want to talk with you for a minute. I'm going to go ahead and skip the break. I want to talk with you for a minute about how we take everything we've talked about. How do we express that love to ourselves, right? How does it show up? One, yes, as an expression, but two, as behavioral, right?
Right.
And how do we then turn that into the movement towards our desires? Let's talk about how we take that love or reflection of love and that value and transmute that into manifesting desires. How did it happen for you?
I can't be specific about how it happened for me because there were so many things happening all at once.
But the point is, it does happen, right?
It does happen. It doesn't. Yeah, you can't run from it forever. There's something that happens, but then you have to choose to either go with it or not. One of the main expressions of love that I've learned a lot more about in the last 15, 20 years is grace.
Oh.
Now, having grace for yourself or someone else is not exposing your weakness or their weakness to be ridiculed. So, and that came about because I was every once in a while in a group of women who liked to talk about other people.
Oh.
They gossiped a lot, and that's a total lack of grace. Because when you're exposing someone else's weakness, you create all kinds of other feelings in yourself and the people who are listening. And then that person becomes a pariah. And that's a complete lack of love. So when we know what the lack is, then we can turn that around and say, I am going to not expose other people's weaknesses. But if I see someone struggling, I will go and I will ask them, or, I'll get involved and I'll say, like you do with those women, you're getting involved to help them to get from point A to point whatever's next for them.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a huge part of expressing our love to ourselves and to each other. And when we're doing that for other people, it inevitably comes back to us.
Yeah. This is why this conversation is so important. And you're right about that. You're right about it coming back to us. Some people talk about it as energy, some people talk about it as many other things, but there is a law in the universe about this, right? There are a lot of references to what that law might be, but there really is a law of love, right? I don't know anybody's ever call it that. There's a law of attraction, as law, but there is a law of love. And nobody did it better than Peace Pilgrim. Peace Pilgrim's story is just mind blowing. But the message you're bringing out today is there's so much available to us to reinforce this message. We just need to know how to get to it, and we need to know how to use it in our daily lives. Isn't that, maybe I'm projecting, but if we don't have tools, I have a lot of tools to remind me. I have an alarm that goes off that says you have to stop for a minute and you have to listen to something spiritual, or you have to do a mantra. I have like alarm because I need a lot of tools. What have you learned to help people today to remember such an infinite world of possibilities available to them to use?
Well, that's what drew me to the Bible scriptures that I already knew, but I didn't really fully understand. And I would listen to people talk about them, but I'd keep going, thinking to myself, no, that wasn't everything. There's more. There's a verse that says you already have everything in your spirit to live a holy and godly life. You already have it. That means already, it's already there, and you have everything. Those two words right there, already and everything. You have access to everything that God's Holy Spirit has for you, holding a big, bag of gifts. And all we need to do is reach in and take one at a time and open it up. And teaching people about this is not always easy because they all have their own blinders on from their own experiences and the expectation either from them or others, agendas, whatever else they grew up with. And I mean, I have all those as well. I can go back and reference them, but they're not going to do most people any good because they can't relate to them. And I can't always relate to someone else's. So the main thing is to be focused on the goodness of life.
Yeah. And I think that's, for me, is what the biggest reminder is today, is really to understand that we can do small things to accomplish great outcomes. Right. And that's the miracle, I think, of what you're sharing today. It's the miracle of being willing to engage. See, it doesn't really take a whole lot, being willing to engage. In that program I mentioned, there's only one requirement in all of those programs. There's only one requirement, and that is a willingness. That is the number one requirement to walk in those rooms. Not you have to have this, or you have had to do this, or you have to have X. No, it's a willingness to change. And from that willingness, you decide you're going to do what it takes to make that change happen. And what you're bringing out, Gina T, is you're bringing out the availability and infinite possibilities, so that we don't have to struggle trying to figure out what's available to me. What do I need to know? Right? Isn't that mainly, a large part of what you're doing to help people?
Yes, that is my hope, to always be able to come and flip the switch. And when the electricity starts to flow, then all the other things, the lights go on, and you start seeing things differently.
It's interesting. I want to share this story with you, and I want you to comment on it. I remember my uncle, before he died, my grandma on my mama's side had a famous meatball recipe. Very exact, though. I mean, there were some things you could mess around with, but there was something very specific in that recipe. And I remember my uncle asking me to make them for him. He was like 90 something. And I could not get the exact ingredient for it. I couldn't get the exact ingredient. And I took a shortcut. And I even bought a more expensive ingredient. And wouldn't you know, one bite from my uncle, and he was, this is not the recipe. And I think about what you're sharing. If we have the recipe in front of us, it's right there. The recipe to do exactly what you're saying, to recognize the masterpiece in us. What would cause us not to follow the instructions? I mean, you got to become the Julia Child of your masterpiece in a lot of sense, don't we?
Right. Yes. I don't know, but there are some people who won't implement the things that they learn. And I think that's what holds a lot of people back, is actually implementing, because we can learn all kinds of things.
Yeah.
And people say knowledge is power, but it's not without implementation.
No. And you left a giant invitation today that leads to implementation. And you just nailed it here. And you talked about the power of gratitude. See, that in itself is such a bonus, isn't it? If we could just learn that. Not gratitude for the great things that show up, but I think you mentioned gratitude for everything. Didn't you say that?
Yes.
Wow. Gina, thank you for today. Please again, mention how people can connect with you. And then I would love to know what your personal message is. But first, let's give folks some information.
Okay. Instagram, Gina T Coach. My website, ginatcoach.com. Those are the two main ways to get a hold of me. Let's see. And then what was the next thing?
What's your personal message? What would you like to leave us with today? Yeah. And, you know, maybe you want to give us a scripture of the day too.
Well, I would say, don't wait. Tomorrow is going to be a different day. And even though it's a new day and a new chance to do good things, start your journey, start your quest. Whether it's with me or on your own, ask for wisdom when you read anything, not just the Bible, but ask for wisdom and how you can assimilate it and implement it into your life. I do have a couple of scriptures here from Proverbs 4:7. Do not forsake wisdom. She will protect you. Love her and she will watch over you. Wisdom is supreme. Therefore, get wisdom. And obviously, it's been said 3 times in there at least. You can't say it enough. It's so important. It's more than knowledge.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
And she is magnificent and available all the time to us, isn't she?
Yes,
oh
absolutely.
My gosh. Gina T, everybody, I'm Dr. Pat. By the way, for those of you that are, I had somebody text me and say, how can we tell you about what shows we'd like to have? Just send us an email at comments@thedrpatshow.com and let us know what you want to hear more of. That's why we did the 2 shows today. We hear you. Gina, thank you so much. I can't thank you enough for helping us out today, for imparting her wisdom on us. Olivia, thank you. Benny, thank you. Jacob, and to all of you out there, please, please, please know you are the best audience in the world, and you are what gets us up every day to make sure we give you what you're asking for. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you next time.
You've been listening to Living Excellently, Becoming Your Masterpiece, aligned in heart, mind, and spirit with Gina T. Tune in live each month on TransformationTalkRadio.com, where Gina T helps guide you to spiritual alignment on your life journey with awe and wonder. Level up to live excellently, give generously, and trust unconditionally on Living Excellently. For more information, connect with Gina T at GinaTCoach.com.